I said, our theme for this year is living our spiritual values, and our theme for the month is freedom of choice. And if you're getting the Science of Mind magazine, they have aligned their themes for the magazine with the theme for the month as well. So freedom of choice is also the theme for the magazine. And the value that we are valuing in this moment, the spiritual value, is open communication. And the book for this month is a book called Gracism. Gracism, the Art of Inclusion. Gracism, yes, the Art of Inclusion. So, of course, we're celebrating the 4th of July, which celebrates our freedom from a monarchy and celebrating our own democracy. But, of course, we remember that the people who wrote our Constitution and Declaration of Independence were all white male landowners. And originally, voting was for white male landowners only. But fortunately, they wrote these documents. They made a framework for our democracy that allowed us to change things, that allowed us to do away with slavery, that allowed us to let black men vote, that allowed us to let women vote, that allowed us to do a lot of things that could not have been foreseen in that first group of men gathered around the table. And so we celebrate the fact that we are open to change, because I know I studied systems theory when I was in graduate school. And in systems theory, they talk about open systems and closed systems. And closed systems are subject to entropy, which is everything moves from order to chaos. When you have an open system, you go through periods of chaos, but they bring you to a higher level of order. So we may be going through one of those periods that looks very chaotic, but if we're staying open, we're moving to a higher level of order. So in his book, David Anderson is a minister. So it has a very Christian bent to it. But he's a minister, and he came from New York. He was serving an urban church that had big housing projects and really terrible conditions there. And then he got an internship in a white suburb of Chicago. So he had a rather used Honda Civic. He was driving to his assignment, and on the way he was stopped by the police. He gave them his license. They went back and checked whatever. Then they came back, they gave him his license. And before he went on his way, he said, "May I ask why you stopped me?" And he said, "You look like someone we're looking for." He got stopped again on his way to lunch. He got stopped again on the way back from lunch. He got stopped again on his way leaving work, heading home. Now, after getting stopped 4 times in one day, he said, "There's really something going on here. It doesn't have anything to do. They know, couldn't somebody tell them, this guy we've stopped 4 times already, you don't have to stop him again?" He knew it was about his color, but he also knew the presence of what he calls the Holy Spirit, what we call the presence of God. And so he had that presence, and so what he got out of that whole experience was that he had to find a way to build bridges of reconciliation between the races. He says, when the grace of God can be communicated through the beauty of race, then you have gracism. When the grace of God can be communicated through the beauty of race, then you have gracism. I mean, we don't have just one variety of flower. We don't have just one variety of animal. We don't have just one variety of anything. We've got multitudinous varieties. The nature of God is abundance. And so all of these different kinds of people have been created. But at the essence, they are all incarnations of the one. All have that divine spark. So how do we move beyond this? Well, he talks about an experiment. There was an experiment done in a social setting where there were 10 people applying for a job. And they had before they went in for the interview, they had a red dot painted on their cheek. So they went into the interview, sitting across the table from the interviewer, and then when they came out, each of them was debriefed. And so each of them said that the interviewer only looked at their red dot, kept looking at their red dot. And it turned out that 5 of them didn't have a red dot. They had painted a clear circle on their cheek. They didn't have a red dot. There was nothing that the interview was looking at. But what it points out is that people feel self-conscious about whatever makes them insecure. People feel self-conscious about whatever makes them feel insecure. I know my mom was always insecure about her nose. It had a little bump in it. And she thought everybody was looking at the bump on her nose. I mean, nobody was looking at the bump on her nose. I got acne when I was 11. So I was always thinking everybody was looking at my pimples, and they probably weren't even looking at me. So, but when you're a teenager especially, you think, you're the center of the universe, which you are, but that's a whole other talk. So what Anderson says is because our world is still racialized, in other words, we keep thinking that we're different, racial discussions often feel forced, unsafe, and either overplayed or under-addressed. I was caught a brief scene on television last night of a show called Insecure. And there was this black woman, college-educated black woman, talking to a bunch of kids. She's in a nonprofit that is for kids in high-risk neighborhoods and things like that. And they just totally ridiculed her because her hair wasn't right, she didn't talk right, she was their color, but she wasn't their class, right? There was a whole different theme going on there. So we have all of these things, he says, but talking about race, he says, when you have people in a country that have been made to feel that their dots are ugly, unwanted, and limiting to their success, you will also find behaviors that contribute to their self-perceptions. You will also find behaviors that contribute to their self-perceptions. And a couple of months ago, we talked about when African Americans were asked to put their race on a form before they took a test, they did worse than when they weren't asked for their race. But just having to put their race all of a sudden made them insecure about what they knew. Now, sometimes it leads to people overachieving. I don't know whether any of you have watched the series This Is Us. In that, there are triplets. Actually, 2 of them are from the triplets, and 1 is an adopted African American. But they were all born on the same day, and they were raised as brothers and sisters. And the African American one is the most successful, is the most stable. He has a family, he has a home, because he was driven to overachieve. In order to be as good, you have to be much better. And I remember back in the feminist days, one of the people said, but fortunately, that's not difficult. So, but that was then, this is now. But for a lot of people, they get hopeless. They lose any will to strive. They just feel that they're not going to be seen, they're not going to be appreciated, they're going to be judged and misjudged. And what he says is, hopelessness is a weapon of mass destruction. hopelessness is a weapon of mass destruction. He says white men also have a dot. He talks about dotism. They also have a dot because they don't feel like they're part of that whole inclusion movement. They don't know if they're a part of it. And they're all, like, are they going to say the wrong thing? Is somebody going to think they're a racist because they frame something the wrong way or they say something the wrong way? And this push for diversity and multiculturalism for some feels very threatening. And some of them are like, I'm not giving up my power. I am not giving up my right to feel superior to everyone. In fact, there was an article that I read last week from a man who grew up in a very fundamentalist rural area in America. And he said that the white people there feel that their whiteness means they are singled out for blessings by God. That because they're white, they are absolutely entitled, because God made them white, they are the top of the rung. And he said, and nothing you could say or do would convince them otherwise. Reason does not work, because they're basing this on what they think it says in the Bible. But if you ever read the Bible, any stand you want to take about anything, you can find something in the Bible to back you up, because it's got a little bit of everything for everyone. So, we've got all of these issues, and we've even experienced racism ourselves, I'm sure. I remember being refused service at a restaurant in Japan. Didn't want Gaijin in there. I remember seeing a TV program, a British TV program, and of course, the Irish maid was always drunk. And, when I saw that, I felt bad. It made me feel like, they're ridiculing, they're sort of stereotyping Irish people. When I went back to Ireland to visit my relatives, we drank tea, and that was it. The relatives from America were bringing out the bourbon, but not in Ireland. St. Patrick's there is a high holy day. You go to church on St. Patrick's. So we are in this thing where we're judging other people just by appearance. Has anybody ever heard, don't judge a book by its cover, or judge not by appearances? Hello? Again and again and again, we have to be reminded. He consults on diversity with corporations, and he had a woman show up, he interviewed her, and she recently had a coworker who gave her a cotton plant and told her to pick it. He thought that was funny. She didn't. She'd been there for 10 years. She was hoping that they had gotten beyond judging her on her race. I don't know whether any of you have seen that movie, Hidden Figures, about the women who worked on the NASA programs to put a man into space, and the difficulties that they had of race and gender, and being judged from, people's perceptions of what women were capable of, especially black women were capable of. And, we're not the only ones, of course, who have been guilty of racism. There's all kinds of racism. There's enough to go around for all of us. And it's not just racism. There are family feuds. Look at the Middle East. They're all the children of Abraham. And they're fighting it out. Hatfields and the McCoys, Capulets and the Montagues, all of them found a way to make someone the other. Make someone the other. There is no other. Now, we may have had a bad experience. I got mugged by 2 black guys in the lobby of my building in San Francisco. Did that mean that I thought that all black men were muggers from then on? No, because some of my most wonderful teachers in ministerial school were black men. Reverend Dr. Michael Beckwith, Reverend Nirvana Gale. They were wonderful teachers of truth. We have all, in China, they have a whole bunch of ethnic minorities that don't get the same treatment as, there's certain ethnic minorities that get the best treatment and certain ones that don't. I was in China and we were at lunch, and one of the families that was on this tour was a man with his 2 sons from Arizona. We had been there about a week, and at lunch one day, one of the sons said, "They do look different." And I said, "Different from what?" And he said, "From each other." Now, of course, I was raised in San Francisco, so we had every, Heinz 57 varieties of people there. In fact, when I went to Ireland the first time, I freaked out because everybody looked like me. And I was not used to that. I was used to all kinds of varieties of people. In America, we say, okay, here, you're Asian. Well, are you Japanese, Chinese, Korean? What, and then of course within each of those, there's a whole bunch of other things in there. There's nothing that is just homogeneous anywhere. And we don't want that. In biodiversity, the more diversity you have, the more the crops thrive. When you have just one variety of wheat for days, you are putting yourself at risk of having everything die all at once. There are varieties of everything, and the variety is built in to secure sustainability. Variety sustains life. So we are just enjoying the realization that we are here to celebrate our diversity, to include everyone at the table. We have racism is an equal opportunity destroyer. Anything that encourages us to differentiate from each other is something to be looked at. Now, does this mean that some of us have some skills that other people don't have? Sure, but they have skills we don't have. I remember when I was a programmer, the programmers all thought they were hot, and then we had the people who actually did the job that we were working on to try to make it faster, more efficient, blah, blah, blah. And they would have to test our stuff. Well, they were critical because we didn't know the job, they did. They had to tell us what we had to do to make this system work. And so many times we would come up with all these bells and whistles and things, and they were like, no. We don't need that. What we need is this. So we have to listen to people that we think are different from us because They all have something to contribute. Everybody wouldn't be here if they didn't have a gift to give. And so we have to be open to the gift and encourage everyone to know that they have a gift, to allow them to share that gift, to express that gift, and to be who they came here to be. And if we suppress them, if we discriminate, if we don't let people fulfill that divine urge, we are shortchanging ourselves and our society. So, what Anderson says is whether white, black, Mexican, Arab, Muslim, male, female, straight, gay, disabled, overweight, Jewish, Catholic, whatever, everyone has the capability of putting someone else down based on color, culture, class, or religion. Everyone has that opportunity and capability. So the question is, what is your red dot? What makes you feel insecure around other people? Too tall, too short, too heavy, too slim, too old? What is it? What's our red dot? And how is society working to minimize dotism? And what's still going on that is encouraging dotism? Anderson defines racism as speaking, acting, or thinking negatively about someone solely based on that person's color, class, or culture. That's his definition. But he says when you bring God into it, then you add the G, and it becomes gracism. When you bring God into it, what you have is a positive extension of what he calls favor on other humans based on color, class, or culture. Now, he does make a distinction. In the Bible, they talk about God's favor, but it doesn't mean favoritism. Favor is like love your neighbor as yourself. That is favor. But favoritism implies exclusion. Favoritism says these guys get special treatment and these guys don't. But when we have people who are on the margins, when we have people who are being discriminated against because of their culture, their class, their religion, their color, whatever, then our duty, he says, as people of God, is to assist with that. It's to pay attention to the people on the margins. He says, favor is showering extra grace on a few while having love for all. Showering extra grace on a few while having love for all. So there's a quick story. There was a woman who went to the airport. This is one of the examples he has of gracism. She went to the airport. She was riding on Southwest, and this is when Southwest just gave you an A, B, or C assignment. They didn't give you a number at that time. They just gave you were A, B, C. So you had to get there early so you could get in line. So because your place on the airplane was determined by your place in line. And it would just be whoever got there first. So she's been in line for about half an hour. And of course, it's a line. People are sitting on the floor. People are standing. People are on their cell phones and everything. And all of a sudden, this very loud Spanish family shows up. They're speaking Spanish very loudly. There's a dad and a mom and two kids. And they're looking at their tickets, and they're looking at the A, and they're looking at their tickets. And then they sort of start heading up the A line. And as they start heading up the A line, everybody in the A line starts getting closer to one another. And the men start standing on the outside like, the defensive line of a football game. They're all on the outside like, no way you're getting in here. We're here. We got here early and we're not letting you in. And she said, and that was what was going through her mind too. She was like, everybody was thinking, oh, stupid foreigners. And, who do they think they are trying to butt in? But they're like trying to figure out how this works because, normally on an airline you have an assigned seat and you go to your assigned seat, but this is not the case here. And so they're just sort of wandering up and down the sides looking for a place to get in, but nobody is letting them in. And she's going through the scenario herself. She's thinking all these righteous thoughts. I got here a half an hour ago and I'm, nobody's getting in front of my line. And then she says, and then she got smacked down by the Holy Spirit. A smackdown by the Holy Spirit is when a whole other idea comes into your mind and you realize you have a change of thought. And the change of thought said, would it really kill you to let these people in? Would it be kind if you were in a foreign country where you did not speak the language, you were trying to figure out what was happening, what was going on? Wouldn't you want someone to be kind to you? And so she reached over and she tapped the woman on the shoulder and said, please get in front of me. And the woman didn't understand what she said, but she saw the motion. And she said the smile on her face was so huge that she thought she was going to cry. And so she grabbed her husband and they grabbed the kids and they moved in. And then she had this feeling that comes when we do what we've been asked to do, which is a feeling of peace and a feeling of joy and a feeling of oneness, that we did a kindness for someone that we were called to do. So we are in a multicultural society. I have a dear friend. Her mother was Japanese and Samoan. Her father was Irish and Samoan. So she was Japanese, Irish, and Samoan, and she married an African American. So her children are African American, Samoan, Irish, and Japanese. Which box do you check on the form? We are in a society that is in the midst of change, and it always has been. Previously, it was the Irish or the Italians or the Russian Jews or the Armenians. All of us came over here as the immigrant, as the minority. There are a few of here who are probably daughters of the American Revolution. That's great. But we all did come, because when the daughters of the American Revolution or the daughters of the Mayflower or whatever came over, there were people here already. So we all have been immigrants. So it's opening our hearts to realize that the people who are coming over here are coming for a reason. They're coming for opportunity or they're fleeing destruction. And we've all done this. Fled destruction. How many Irish came over during the famine? So every culture, every race, everything contributes to a richer life experience for all of us. And Ernest Holmes said, love overlooks the little differences that we have and finds a point of reconciliation with others. Love creates tolerance and human understanding, without which we become really divided against ourselves, and without which we almost unconsciously become filled with criticism, condemnation, and false judgment. No one can be happy or enjoy the greatest fulfillment in life until he has come to see that most people try to do about the best they can. And when we are able to reach out beyond the indifference and the coldness of life, reach through all the intolerance and unkindness, only then do we meet that divine center which is forever established within every person. And so our affirmation for today is, I appreciate the beautiful diversity of life. 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 And so it is.